In the 19th century, modern pharmaceuticals did not exist, and exhausted parents turned to patent medicines, unregulated, over-the-counter remedies that claimed to cure everything from headaches to tuberculosis. These medicines were marketed with bold claims and testimonials, preying on public trust. One of the most infamous examples was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, patented in 1845 by Charlotte Winslow and her son-in-law, Jeremiah Curtis. Marketed as a miracle cure for teething babies, colic, and diarrhea, the syrup gained immense popularity due to aggressive advertising, including testimonials from mothers and even reverends. Curtis placed ads in thousands of newspapers, presenting the syrup as a godsend for desperate parents. Number 1. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. What made Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup uniquely effective and dangerous was its active ingredient, morphine, a powerful opioid. Morphine provided genuine pain relief, which explained why babies stopped crying and slept soundly. However, the syrup contained dangerously high doses, up to 40 milligrams per day for infants, far exceeding modern medical standards, where adults typically receive 2 to 4 milligrams for severe pain. The syrup lacked any warning labels, and parents, unaware of the risks, administered it multiple times a day. Side effects included extreme drowsiness, respiratory depression, constipation, and addiction. Despite its effectiveness in silencing fussy babies, the syrup caused countless infant deaths due to overdoses and long-term health complications. For decades, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup flourished in an era before FDA regulations or medical oversight. Doctors had not yet organized into a formal profession, and there was no American Medical Association to challenge such products. By the late 19th century, medical professionals began linking infant mortality and addiction to the syrup, but it wasn't banned until the 1930s, making it one of the longest-selling and deadliest patent medicines in U.S. history. The legacy of Mrs. Winslow's highlights the dangers of unregulated pharmaceuticals and the tragic consequences of profit-driven medicine in the absence of scientific scrutiny. Number 2. The brutality of surgery before anesthesia and the advent of ether and chloroform. Before the late 19th century, surgery was a horrifying ordeal performed without anesthesia. Patients undergoing amputations or other major procedures were often restrained while fully conscious, biting down on leather straps or bullets to endure the agony. Civil War-era surgeries were particularly gruesome, with surgeons working quickly to saw off limbs before patients died from shock or blood loss. The mortality rate was staggering, not just from the injuries themselves, but from the trauma of the operation. The first major breakthrough came in 1846 when Boston dentist William T.G. Morton successfully used ether as a general anesthetic during surgery. Ether rendered patients unconscious, allowing surgeons to operate without inflicting unbearable pain. Shortly after, in 1847, Scottish obstetrician James Young Simpson introduced chloroform to ease labor pains, gaining favor, even with Queen Victoria, who used it during childbirth. By the 1860s, New York professor Gardner Quincy Colton popularized nitrous oxide, laughing gas, for dental procedures. However, these early anesthetics were far from safe. Ether was highly flammable, and chloroform carried risks of cardiac arrest or fatal respiratory depression if improperly dosed. Surgeons walked a fine line between sedation and death, as even slight miscalculations could prove lethal. Despite these dangers, the introduction of general anesthesia revolutionized medicine, making previously unthinkable surgeries possible. Yet, the search continued for safer, more localized alternatives to avoid the risks of knocking patients out entirely. Number 3. Cocaine as local anesthesia. Dr. Carl Kohler and the dangerous experiments of William Halsted. The limitations of general anesthesia led doctors to seek localized alternatives, and in the late 19th century, Austrian ophthalmologist Dr. Carl Kohler made a groundbreaking discovery: cocaine as a surgical anesthetic. Kohler observed that cocaine numbed mucous membranes and began injecting it directly into patients' eyeballs, allowing painless eye surgeries, a revolutionary advancement in a field where even minor procedures had been excruciating. Inspired by Kohler's success, American surgeon William Halsted began experimenting with cocaine as a nerve-blocking agent. Halsted and his colleagues injected themselves with cocaine to test its effects on peripheral nerves, confirming its numbing properties. This laid the foundation for modern nerve block anesthesia, enabling targeted pain relief without full unconsciousness. However, Halsted's experiments had devastating consequences. He and his colleagues became severely addicted. 2 of his peers died from overdoses, and Halsted himself struggled with addiction for the rest of his life. His only published paper on the subject was reportedly incoherent, likely written under the influence. Despite the personal toll, Halsted's work was pivotal. By the early 20th century, synthetic alternatives like Procaine, Novocaine were developed to replicate cocaine's numbing effects without the addiction risk. However, cocaine itself was outlawed in 1914 under the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. Halsted's legacy is paradoxical. His reckless self-experimentation led to life-saving medical advancements, but also underscored the dangers of unregulated drug use in medicine. Number 4. The long road to medical regulation and the fall of patent medicines. The late 19th and early 20th centuries marked a turning point in medical ethics and regulation. The horrors of unregulated patent medicines, like Mrs. Winslow's syrup, and the dangers of experimental drugs, such as cocaine anesthesia, exposed the need for oversight. Public outrage grew as investigative journalists, like those behind The Jungle, 1906, and muckraking exposés on patent medicines, pressured the government to act. Key legislative milestones included the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, which required ingredient labeling and banned adulterated products, and the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, which regulated opiates and cocaine. Finally, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 mandated safety testing before drugs could be sold, effectively ending the era of deadly patent medicines. To conclude, the evolution from morphine-laced baby syrup to regulated pharmaceuticals, and from brutal surgeries to modern anesthesia, reflects medicine's turbulent journey towards scientific rigor and ethical responsibility. These historical developments underscore the importance of evidence-based medicine, a lesson hard-learned through addiction, infant mortality, and countless avoidable deaths.